The Trojan War did not begin with swords or spears. It began with a single golden apple. At the wedding of Peleus and the sea goddess Thetis, all the gods of Olympus were invited, except Eris, the goddess of discord. Furious, she cast a golden apple into the feast. Upon it were written the words, "To the fairest." 3 goddesses claimed it: Hera, queen of the gods; Athena, goddess of wisdom; and Aphrodite, goddess of love. None dared to choose between them, so the task was given to a mortal, Paris, prince of Troy. Each goddess offered him a gift. Hera promised power, Athena promised wisdom and victory, but Aphrodite promised him the most beautiful woman alive. Paris chose love, he chose Aphrodite. But that woman was Helen, queen of Sparta, already married to King Menelaus. With Aphrodite's help, Paris stole Helen away to Troy. When Menelaus learned of this betrayal, he called upon the oath sworn by all to defend her marriage at any cost. And so the kings and heroes of Greece gathered. Among them, Achilles, Odysseus, Ajax, and Agamemnon. Together they launched 1,000 ships toward Troy. Yet this would not be a war of men alone. Hera and Athena vowed to destroy Troy, while Aphrodite protected Paris. Even Zeus himself watched as destiny unfolded. Thus, pride, jealousy, and love lit the spark that would ignite one of the greatest wars. The Greek fleet gathered at Aulis, ready to sail for Troy. But suddenly the winds stopped. The seers declared the truth. The goddess Artemis was angry. To appease her, a terrible sacrifice was demanded. Agamemnon's own daughter, Iphigenia. Some say she was slain, others believe Artemis saved her at the last moment. Either way, the fleet finally sailed, but the war was already marked by tragedy. When the Greeks landed on Troy's shores, chaos erupted. Spears clashed, shields broke, and the cries of warriors filled the air. Achilles, the greatest of the Greeks, fought like a storm, while Ajax towered in strength and Odysseus guided with cunning. Yet Troy did not fall. The walls stood strong, and Hector, prince of Troy, defended his people with honor and duty. To end the bloodshed, it was decided that Paris and Menelaus would duel. Menelaus nearly killed Paris, but Aphrodite swept him away in divine mist. The duel resolved nothing. The war had only just begun. For 9 long years, the Greeks and Trojans fought endlessly. Villages burned, heroes rose, and yet Troy endured. On one side, Hector, the noble defender of the city. On the other, Achilles, a warrior of unmatched fury, but also of dangerous pride. And above them all, the gods themselves chose sides. Hera and Athena supported the Greeks, while Aphrodite and Apollo fought for Troy. Zeus tried to remain neutral, but even he could not stop fate. Prophets warned that Troy's fall was inevitable, and that Achilles' destiny was sealed. He could live long and forgotten, or die young and immortal in glory. This was no ordinary war. This was destiny itself, written in blood, fire, and the will of the gods. For 9 long years, the Trojan War dragged on. Neither side could claim victory, until pride and wrath changed everything. Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Greeks, turned his anger not against the Trojans, but against his own commander Agamemnon. When Agamemnon insulted him and took Briseis, Achilles refused to fight. Without him, the Greeks began to falter, and Hector, prince of Troy, led his people with courage, pushing the Greeks back to the sea. But fate would not stay still. Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, could not watch his people suffer. Wearing Achilles' armor, he led the charge, striking fear into the Trojans. For a moment, they believed Achilles had returned, yet Hector stood against him and killed him, only to realize too late that it was Patroclus. When the news reached Achilles, grief consumed him, but sorrow turned into a fury so great that even the gods trembled. His mother Thetis brought him new armor, forged by Hephaestus himself, and Achilles returned to battle like a storm unleashed. The Trojans fell before him. The river itself rose in anger, but nothing could stop his wrath. At last, destiny brought him face to face with Hector. On the walls, Hector's family begged him not to fight, but honor left him no choice. He stood against Achilles and fell. With one final strike, Achilles ended the life of Troy's greatest defender. Then, in cruel rage, he dragged Hector's body across the dust as his family wept from the walls. Hector, the shield of Troy, was gone. The city still stood, but its heart was broken. And though Achilles burned with victory, the shadow of his own fate grew ever closer, for no hero, no matter how great, can outrun destiny. The duel of Achilles and Hector shook the world. Hector was gone, but the war was far from over, because this was never just a war of men, it was the war of the gods. From the very beginning, Olympus was divided. Hera, Athena, and Poseidon fought for the Greeks, driven by old grudges and the insult of Paris's judgment. Aphrodite, Apollo, and Ares stood with the Trojans, bound by love, loyalty, and vengeance. And high above them all, Zeus tried to remain neutral, but even the king of the gods could not control the storm. Apollo raged after Hector's death. His plague struck the Greek camp, his arrows bringing disease and death. Yet Achilles, burning with fury, was unstoppable. Even the gods feared his wrath. So Hera and Athena intervened. While Hera lulled Zeus into slumber, Athena guided the Greeks on the battlefield. Standing at Achilles' side, whispering victory into his ear, Poseidon thundered against Troy, his trident shaking the earth. The gods themselves clashed. Ares stormed the battlefield, only to be struck down by Athena. Apollo battled Poseidon, sun against sea, bow against trident. Hephaestus unleashed fire upon the Trojans, while Aphrodite herself was wounded, her divine blood falling to the earth. Mortals watched in terror as immortals fought beside them, Olympus itself at war, and yet even among Achilles. From birth, his mother Thetis had tried to protect him, dipping him in the river Styx, leaving only his heel vulnerable. Prophets warned Achilles would not live to see Troy's fall. His glory would be eternal, but his life short. Achilles knew this truth, and still he chose glory. If I must die, let it be with spear in hand and my name everlasting. As the gods withdrew, both sides prepared for the end. In Troy, grief consumed the city. Paris clung to Aphrodite's promise, while Helen wept in guilt. In the Greek camp, Odysseus schemed, Agamemnon plotted, and Achilles sharpened his spear. The war was reaching its final act. The gods had taken their sides, mortals had paid the price, and destiny had already chosen. The stage was set for the fall of Troy. For 10 long years, Troy had withstood the storm. Heroes had died, gods had fought, and yet the city's mighty walls still stood unbroken. But Troy would not fall to strength. It would fall to deception. The prophecy of Achilles came true first. Guided by Apollo, Paris loosed an arrow that struck Achilles' one weak spot, his heel. The greatest warrior of Greece fell, and with him hope seemed lost. But where brute force failed, cunning would triumph. And the mind of Odysseus gave birth to the most infamous trick in history, the Trojan Horse. A massive wooden horse was built hollow within, hiding Greece's finest warriors. The rest of the army pretended to retreat, sailing away, leaving the horse as a gift to Athena. The Trojans found it at dawn, standing before their gates. The city was divided. Some, like the prophet Laocoon, warned, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." He hurled a spear at the horse, and it echoed hollow. But fate had spoken. Sea serpents rose from the waves, killing Laocoon and his sons. The Trojans believed it was Athena's punishment, and so, with shouts of triumph, they dragged the horse inside the city. That night Troy celebrated. Music, wine, and laughter filled the streets. The people believed the war was finally over. But at midnight, the Greek fleet silently returned, and from inside the horse, Odysseus and his men emerged. They opened the gates. The full Greek army poured into Troy. The city erupted in fire and blood. Flames devoured towers, screams pierced the night. King Priam was butchered at the altar. Hector's wife Andromache was enslaved, her infant son thrown from the walls. Cassandra cried her last prophecy, unheard. Paris too was struck down, and Helen, the woman whose beauty had sparked it all, was spared. Menelaus had come to kill her, but when he saw her, his rage melted. Whether it was love or destiny, she lived and returned to Greece. By dawn, Troy was gone. Its proud walls stood blackened, its people slain or enslaved. The city had not fallen by strength, but by a lie. The Greeks had won, but their victory was cursed. Agamemnon would be murdered by his own wife. Odysseus would wander for 10 years before reaching home, and the war that promised eternal glory brought only ruin. What endured was the legend, The fall of Troy became a timeless tale of pride, of love, of betrayal, and the will of the gods. The flames of Troy eventually died, but the story of the war never did. The ruins became silent monuments to a conflict greater than life itself. Heroes, kings, gods, and mortals, all trapped in the grip of destiny. Troy was gone, yet its legend had just begun. The Greeks, though victorious, found their triumph cursed. Agamemnon, the mighty commander, returned home only to be slain by his wife Clytemnestra for the sacrifice of their daughter. Menelaus sailed back with Helen, yet their victory felt hollow, scarred forever by the war her beauty had sparked. And Odysseus, his brilliance had conquered Troy, but the gods had not forgiven him. His journey home would last 10 years of storms, monsters, and endless trials, becoming the immortal tale of the Odyssey. The Trojans who survived suffered no less. Hector's wife Andromache was enslaved, their infant son thrown from the city walls. Cassandra, cursed to speak prophecies no one believed, was dragged into slavery, her visions unheard. Yet one man carried destiny with him, Aeneas, son of Aphrodite. With his father on his back and his son at his side, he fled Troy's ashes. His descendants, it was said, would found Rome itself. From the fall of Troy, another empire would rise, and so the heroes became eternal. Achilles, dead, yet immortal in Paris, the prince whose desire changed the world, and Helen, the woman whose beauty could both enchant and destroy. It was not survivors who preserved their memory, it was poets. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey turned memory into myth. Virgil's Aeneid gave Troy's survivors a new destiny. Playwrights and storytellers across centuries retold the war, finding new lessons in its tragedy. But Troy is more than a story of war. It is a love that consumes lives, fate that even gods cannot stop, and legacy that even in ruin, stories are born that outlast empires. The Trojan War may never have happened exactly as sung, but its truth is eternal. Achilles, Hector, Helen, they live on, not in flesh, but in story. The walls of Troy burned to ashes, but its legend never died, and as long as we tell stories of glory and loss, of love and betrayal,